Hello, welcome to Musher's Tales. This video will be the second in where I just share my thoughts regarding having a dog that's fun to go with in the woods, having a bush dog. In the first section, the main theme is get a dog that likes to stick with people, get them before the 49th day and spend the day with them, and train that dog so he can work, he can be off leash. Okay, I mean, a bush dog that has to be on a leash is not a good bush dog. A leash is in the way. Okay, you have to be able to control that dog without a leash, and the dog should not require a leash. And when you bring a leash with you, because you never know what's going to happen, but the dog should not be required to be on a leash when you're in the woods. No way. I mean, if you go back to the video I put on a couple of weeks ago where we see the moose, those dogs weren't on a leash, it wasn't a problem, and they didn't chase the moose. They just warned us that the moose was there. It's exactly what I wanted. Just give me a nice warning and let me handle the rest, and not have a dog that, you know, wants to chase the moose and then all of a sudden say, oh boy, that's too big, and come back to me looking for help, which is the main problem with a small dog. Okay, small dogs are kind of known for that. They start a fight, and when the fight gets a little hairy, they run back to the master looking for help. So, in the case of a bear or a large animal like a moose or something, they're just bringing the animal right back to you. They're bringing the danger to you instead of helping you with the danger. So, the other thing a bush dog, to be practical, could do would be to haul a sled with your gear on it. A dog either wants to pull or he doesn't. Okay, you can get pretty well any dog to pull, but it's a little bit more complicated to get a dog to pull with enthusiasm. So the enthusiasm part, that's tricky. Okay, so that's either they have it or not. But to have them work for you because you want them to, you can do that. And one of the first steps in having them do that is having them, is what not to teach them. And what you do not want to teach them is how to heel using a leash. Your dog has to learn how to heel. By that I mean walk behind you. Now, most people prefer on the left side. Don't know. You know, it doesn't really matter to me as long as they're behind me. If I say heel, it means stay behind me, don't go in front. The traditional way to do this is basically you have the dog in a leash. When the dog goes in front of you, you say heel and give him a yank on the leash. Obviously, the younger the dog is when you do this, the better it is. I mean, a 10 or 15 pound puppy hits the end of the leash and you pull him back, easily done. 60-pound dog hits the end of the leash, pulling him back, no, not going to happen so easily. Very rough on your shoulders, on your wrists, on your hands, and the dog could figure out he's stronger than you, and dog on four-wheel drive with a little bit of a head start pulling you, yeah, you better be pretty heavy to yank him off his feet. So often it's not the case. So the idea is to teach a dog to heel without being on the leash. Now, a few ways to do that, okay? The basic idea is you start young, and whenever the dog goes in front of you, you say no, heel, and you make the dog go behind you. Now, you could have a stick in your hand, so a dog is in front of you, you guide him back with a stick, a little tap, okay? Something like a tennis racket, okay? Even an article of clothing, okay, like a towel or something that you could wave in front of the dog. You're not going crazy, you don't want to spook the dog, but you just want the dog to realize, whoop, when I go in front, this happens. Okay, if he tells me to stay in back, he gives me the command heel, I stay in back or else this happens. Now I'm sure there's a way to do it with an electric collar, a shock collar. I don't use them. I don't know a lot about them. I don't own one. It's not that I don't think it's a good idea. I know people think it's a great idea. I have misgivings about it, but again, I don't really know enough about it to voice an educated opinion. So, But yeah, you know, the way to do it, you want the dog to heel, okay, without discouraging him from being a puller. It's basically tell the dog to be behind you, and when he goes in front of you as you walk, you do something to make him stay behind you. Okay, now again, stick, jacket, something, you know, just when he goes in front, you make him going back. And the trick is to be consistent. I mean, if the dog says, geez, okay, I only have to go in back after he says it 10 times, not so effective. If the dog says, geez, if I get out of range, okay, I mean, he gets a little bit, I get, you know, more than 3 feet away, he says heel, he can't enforce it, well then it's not going to work either. So, if you do use a cord to heel, okay, or a leash to heel, make sure it's long enough. Okay, long enough and short enough. You don't want that sweet spot to be associated with heel. And the sweet spot is the length of the length that you're going to have the dog tied to your sled. Okay, let's say when you have your dog pull your sled, the cord is going to be 6 feet long. Well, make sure you don't teach the dog to heel at 6 feet. Or else what's going to happen is he's not going to want to pull that sled. So, with regards to the actual pulling, okay, the pulling from this is not me saying this. This is somebody who raised a lot of sled dogs saying this, who gave a little seminar which I attended, and he said basically, when you're teaching a lead dog, any cord more than 7 to 10 feet is too long. So once a dog hits 7 to 10 feet, that's perfect, okay? And basically, you have the dog walk in front of you, and he's pulling on the leash, and you're letting him pull the leash. And you're letting him pull your arm. He's feeling resistance, okay? And the resistance can be you bending your arm, it can be you slowing down a bit, but you're letting him pull you along. And that's going to teach him to pull, because he's going to realize that's normal. You do not want to discourage them from pulling. You can also switch it up when the dog's a bit bigger, to pulling a log, to pulling, you know, something with some resistance, and not something with wheels, because something with wheels might crash into him. You absolutely want to avoid anything crashing into the back of the dog when the dog's pulling. And you also want to avoid anything that's going to make any noise that's going to spook the dog. If all of a sudden you hook the dog to a sled on icy ground and there's a loud noise, you know, you hear a loud noise, and all of a sudden, because there's a loud noise, the dog is concerned, the dog wants to run away from the noise. The more the dog runs, the more the noise is, then the dog stops, and then the sled hits the dog. Not good. Might have ruined your dog. Always remember when training a dog, it's like a piece of paper. Once you put a fold in there, really, really hard to get the fold out. And for whatever reason, negative lessons seem to make a much greater impression than positive lessons. In other words, the dog hitting the back, the dog being hit by the sled is going to make a greater impression on the dog than you saying good boy and encouraging the dog pulling the sled. No comparison. So you really want to avoid anything negative for the dog as a lesson, unless it's a behavior you really don't want the dog to do. So keep that in mind when you're teaching the dog to heel. If you want a bush dog, you've got to bring the dog in the bush. And it's going to be more work at first, okay? And it's going to be a nuisance, and there's going to be a lot of negative things to it, okay? But it pays off. Always good to remember that most things that are worth doing are a lot of work. So dogs are not the exception. So a bush dog, yeah, it's going to be a lot of work, because there's going to be a puppy, you got to bring more food and so on and so forth. But the idea is to expose the dog to as many bush things as possible in a controlled environment, so that when the unexpected arrives, the dog's there. And if the unexpected never arrives, great, even better. But you have a companion. Okay, and a companion is always good. Man's a very social animal. Dogs are very social animals. So it makes for a good pairing. I read a saying yesterday, and it says basically the idea of training a dog is not to make the dog half human, okay? But the idea of being with a dog is you accepting the fact that you should become half dog. Okay, and if you think of it, it makes a lot of sense, because dogs are pack animals, and you have to realize that you're becoming, you are, like it or not, that dog's pack, and you're not just that dog's pack, you're the leader of the pack, and everything that entails. So, kind of good advice. Another little trick in dog training is if you see the dog's going to do something, a behavior you want to encourage, well then you just give them the command as they're doing it. I mean, if you know the dog's going to jump in the back of the truck, well you say, hup. Just where you see the dog crouching, you jump in the back of the truck. And eventually the dog makes the association with the word, with the command, with the action. If the dog's pulling your sled and you want him to turn left, but if you see the dog is going to go left, well, you tell him left. Okay? It's really not rocket science. And for teaching your lefts and rights, your G's and H's, again, not a very long leash. One way people do it is they have an area that's mowed and an area that's not mowed. So you let your grass get long, and then you mow basically a trail with T's in it, like on a road, or an X, an intersection, and the grass is what guides the dog. Okay? You can do the same thing with a snowblower. So your snowblower shapes, paths, and when you hit an intersection of the path, you tell them the left or the right, and encourage them to go in that direction. And it's repetition, 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 and putting the time in. Having a trained lesson for a dog, the dog learns a lot. But having a dog with you all the time, dog learns a lot more. Not always feasible, but just remember that the dog in the cage learns nothing. Okay? Everything the dog that's going to learn in that cage learns it really quickly. Okay, so it's not a learning environment at all. And once the dog's past 2 years old, a lot harder to get the dog to learn, as opposed to when they're a puppy and they're a sponge and they absorb everything. And not only that, there's the physical aspect. It's easier to correct a puppy than it is an adult dog. A little tap on the snout of a puppy, a little pish nut, makes quite an effect. Pish nut, a larger dog, it's going to have... Vaccinations are also very important for a bush dog. When the dog's a pup, get them like all dressed, full flush, every shot you can get. Follow those to the letter. However, when the dog's an adult, the main thing is the rabies. Rabies shots are usually good for 3 years. I have all my dogs a rabies shot every 2 years. My hunting dogs, they get every shot every year. Why? Because they're in contact with wild animals, like directly. The huskies, yes, it would be better if they got more vaccinations, but they are fully vaccinated as pups. The following is true for any puppy. Something you should always do when you have your puppy is hide from the dog. Basically, when the dog's in the yard, you want to teach that dog to watch you. Okay, not you watch the dog. So when the dog's not looking, dog's a pup, just hide behind a tree, hide behind a bush, hide behind something that the dog has to find you. Always do it in a controlled environment, but very important. You'll see the pup, all of a sudden the pup notices you're not there and starts being a little frantic, and most pups figure out to use their nose in a hurry. If the dog's freaking out too much, be a little patient, let the dog look. If not, make a noise so the dog will find you with his ears. And what happens is this teaches the dog to keep tabs on you. So as the dog gets older, hide around the house, the yard's bigger, if you're in the woods, step to the side of the trail, and also the dog sees you're not there, comes racing back up the trail. Make sure the dog can find you. It's not hide and seek, okay? What your goal is to have the dog find you, but to keep tabs on you. So it's not to make it too difficult, but if something ever happens, well, then the dog has taught itself to watch you, and also has taught itself to how to find you, using its nose, using its ears. That's it for this episode of Musher's Tales. Thanks for watching.